Hello, my name is Dan Wood, working with the training department today, and this is the first of several videos on the SKS Signature Kitchen Suite column refrigerators. The SKS line is made up of refrigerator and freezers that can be married together to conform to different sizes. From 48 inches down, we make a 24 and a 30-inch refrigerator, an 18 and a 24 freezer, so you can marry two together to fill a space. And we also have a 18 and a 24-inch wine cooler. Today's video, or this video, is going to be on the wine cooler. This model I have right here in front of us, this is the SKS WC18. Now there's also a 24. We only have the 18 to shoot the video, so right from the jump street I'm going to tell you the main differences between this and the other one. This wine cooler has two different storage compartments for wine. The 24 has three. So the only real difference that you, the servicer, are going to see is instead of having two sensors, one for the upper and one for the lower compartment, on the 24 you'll find three, upper, middle, and lower. Instead of an upper fan and a lower fan, you'll find an upper, middle, and lower fan. Same thing with defrost thermostat. There'll be an upper, a middle, and lower. Other parts that are different, this has a three-way valve for the two different compartments. The 24-inch has a four-way valve for the three different cooling compartments. Other than that, disassembly, reassembly is going to be the same. So what we're going to do is go through, and I'm going to basically do this approach. We're going to just give you an overview of the inside real quick, and then we're going to go and look on top, see what's there, how to service it, come inside, take it apart, show you what's there for service. Then we'll go down to the bottom to the machine compartment and show you what's there for service. We're going to break this video down into a couple of segments so that maybe the next time you just need one specific thing, you know, it's either in part one or part two or part three, depending on how many times we cut this apart. But you'll be able to find what you want. So to begin with, this unit does feature the knock-on glass. It's already on. So when the customer, if they want to see their wine, they can just knock on the door and bring up the lights. The lights can be set to 6 different settings of how they want this lighting to come up. Alright, now you'll notice we do not have a door on. We're going to shoot a separate standalone video on mounting and adjusting the doors for the SKS product line. So for all the first 3 or 4 videos we're going to shoot, we're going to do it bare with no doors on them, no panels. Now these units can either a stainless steel door panel, handle, and kick plate can be purchased from LG, or a custom panel can be built by the customer. Please look in the owner's manual and installation guide for weight restrictions. There are weight restrictions depending on the size of the box. It'll tell you how many pounds it can be, because let's face it, there are hinges here that can be overloaded. Alright, so when we first open, and also, yes, all these are built-in units. Today you'll notice I've got it standing on the crate it came in on. It's not to make it easier for me. When you see the freezer video, you'll find why we left it on the crate. These units are top heavy until they're installed, and we took the freezer off. Now we have to have it strapped to the wall while we work on it so it doesn't fall over and break itself. So when I open the unit up, we can see that when this unit comes on, it's giving us 2 temperatures. The 64 degrees is for this upper. Now this is the divider. There's actually a rubber gasket right here that mates up against the glass, so it becomes a division where this air stays up here and this air stays down here. So we can set the upper and lower to 2 completely separate temperatures. Now the control, if I touch it, I can wake it up. We have humidity, upper and lower, light, Wi-Fi, and power. I can kill the power to this unit by pressing and holding the power button and turning the unit off. Wi-Fi is if I'm going to press and hold and wait till it starts blinking, and that's letting me know it is emitting a Wi-Fi signal, so I could at that point get my app on my phone, tie into Wi-Fi, register the product, etc. And we'll cover all the things it can do on Wi-Fi in a later video. All right, the temperatures are just changed by actually hitting the word upper or lower, just like the light is hit by hitting the word light. Humidity. What humidity does is that if you're in a high humid environment, you're starting to see the inside of your glass is starting to fog up, you can put it on humidity and it'll make the fans inside run longer to control that humidity in the compartment. So each one of these is by touching that button to get it to react. Now, this unit is a prototype. It contains one shelf more than is coming out in production. Now the shelves themselves pull out very effortlessly. They are on ball bearing rollers, glides. They come out very nicely. Now, I don't have the exact specification for how many bottles of wine, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4 per rack, so it holds quite a few bottles. Now, the racks themselves are made of wood, and when they're with the drawer fully extended, all you do is you're going to lift up in the front and pull forward, and it comes out. And you'll notice they're notched. So when you go to put it back, you're going to take, and there is a little stub, and we'll show you this closer when we're doing the inside. You're going to push that into the little stub and then drop it back, push it all the way in, pull it out, and now it's once again attached. So it gives you multiple areas to store your wine. Now, the homeowner, or actually the owner of the appliance, should go into the owner's manual to see what is suggested for storing whites, darks, or red wines. I'm not a wine aficionado, so now it's whites and reds. And then even in those, there are further breakdowns for temperature. So please refer to the owner's manual for exact temperatures to place these. The door itself has adjustable hinges. So you can make this where it is very easy to close, or it's very stout. Unit measures 18 inches, the 24 of course would be 24, and the panel allows it to still show the glass. So the panel is not going to cover everything, that would defeat the purpose. This does have the knock-on feature to bring the lights on inside, and it also, as a service technician, where we're used to hitting Ice Plus and Freezer to check for error codes, all we have to do here is wake the board up and hit humidity and light simultaneously, and it gave me 88s just for a second. That lets me know that there are no error codes. If there was an error code, it would come up at that point, and there are several we'll talk about as we go through. All right. So without further ado, what we're going to do is reposition the camera, and we're going to start at the top of the unit and work our way down in the disassembly and where you'll find different things. All right, from the top of the unit. Unfortunately, if you need up here to perform any of the repairs, there's in the service manual, it says remove the door, remove the bolts, and take this whole top piece off. But having come up here, there's only 3 parts up here that are serviceable. Luckily, all 3 of the parts are parts we don't have a huge failure rate, if any. You do have the reed switch for the door. You have the room thermistor. And over here, you have the humidity sensor. So if the unit could be rolled out of its position approximately 6 inches, just enough for you to get your hand back there, you could actually remove the parts and replace them. The sensor is held in by a clip right here, and it's got a quick connect. The switch has got 2 tabs and a disconnect, and the humidity sensor is held on by 3 tabs. So all these could be brought out, replaced, and put right back. Then the wiring harnesses go down into the cavity. Now, I already took the 2 screws off here to show you. The only thing that's in this box is a quick connect of wires going down into the cabinet. And it does have a release. We could actually unplug it. So that's all that's in this case right here. So this is the top. Now, the doors on the SKS products are designed to be reversible. I do not know if every machine, every door is reversible. We would have to look at each individual product to see if it's a reversible door. Alright, to make things a little easier, I took out the first 3 so we could better show you how to get these out. Like I said earlier, pull this out, raise up a little, and pull towards you. And you've got these releases. You can see the little cut into the wood here and here. This one is up, down, and this one's outward. Once you've pulled this rack out that holds the wine, you need to take a screwdriver, and on these rails right here there is one white screw here, and there'll be one on the other rail. That screw has to be removed. All the screws holding these sliding rails are white. So come in and fully remove the screw. I'm going to go ahead and take the other one off also. And now with the screw out, pull the rail all the way outward, then lift up, and it pulls out. You can see the little catch right here that catches right back here in this. So again, pull the rail all the way out, then lift up, and then pull forward. And just be careful not to pinch your fingers. Now, to remove the guides, there are 2 screws, one in the front and one in the back. They have to be loosened. They're slotted holes that this goes into. Now, just lift up and out. Up and out. And now you have the rails out. Now, the interior of the box is a metal. It doesn't hold, but I don't think it's stainless. It may be aluminum or some form of stainless, but just exercise extreme caution. If while pulling this multi-duct out, you don't feel you can get it past these screws, remember this is a high dollar appliance. My suggestion, and what I did the first time, I took all the screws out on one side to give me ample area to pull through. And I'm going to go ahead and do that now. To access the top, the fan, and the multi-duct, up here in the top, we can't really get in with the camera, so I'm going to pop the buttons very carefully. We've had these before in other machines. Now you have 2 Phillips screws. Sometimes finding the heads in that recessed hollow takes a hand screwdriver. Pull these all the way down. And please note which screws come out of where, so during reassembly you can put the right screws in the right holes. Now, the control, all you want to do is slide it slightly forward, and then this back will drop down. You don't need your control out right now. Pull this downward, reach in, and unplug at the quick connect. And all this top cover does, it does 2 things. One, we have air spilling forward to run down the front, but this is also where our upper sensor is located. To actually get the controls out, you would slide forward, rotate it, and it will drop down, and you have 2 quick connects. and you can pull this out. Inside you have your display board and you have your front LED lighting. To get to the upper evaporator, we have to now remove this section here. It's our fan grill. There are two screws, one located right here and one located right here. I will caution you that when you pull that forward, there's a wiring harness that goes to your defrost thermistor. If you don't control pulling that grill off, you will pop the defrost sensor off the suction line, which will, you can put it back on without taking the whole cover off, and I'll show you, but I'm just warning you, it's there. Now, with the two screws removed, just lean forward, lift up slightly, and then just rotate this panel forward. Now, at this point, there's foam on the left and right, but you can now see in this upper left corner, hopefully, you have a couple of wiring harness connections. Disconnect those. And once you get those two down, now you'll notice right here, this wire going up, it actually attaches, and I'm going to pop it off by feel. I've done this once or twice. Never hold it by that, but I did for the video. This sensor, you can see by the shape of the plastic, that attaches to the suction line right behind that. We'll show you in a minute where the tube is curved. So that is your defrost sensor. Now, the first time I pulled this out, not knowing it was there, I popped it off and I panicked until I took the next plate off and said, okay. So here we have our defrost sensor and we have our fan motor. And that's all that's located up in here, is our circulating fan and our defrost sensor. Now from this point, I have two more screws, one here and one here, to remove the shroud. Now this is why I told you to remove the screws on one side. You're going to lift up and you can slide this out and turn it. And even though it has cushioning on both sides, all this is a duct assembly where we're pushing the cool air up, and there is your evaporator. Now, when we look at this, you can see your cap tube coming in, suction line going out. You'll notice no fins, no defrost heater, nothing. Guys, on the wine cooler, since we're not getting into freezing temperatures, what they're doing for defrost is when the unit goes in defrost, all we're doing is leaving the fan operating. So if there is any frost built up on this plate, the fan running over, because the air inside this box will be somewhere between like 37 and up, depending on the wine, that'll actually get rid of any frost, which will drop down, and right here is a defrost drain, and you can, right where my finger is the hole, and there's a tube that runs down into the machine compartment. So right there is everything we have for our upper part of the wine cooler. All right, now I'm going to move a couple of screws real quick and take out the divider. All right, to remove the divider, you have two screws, 1 and 2, located in the very back. Once you remove those, don't do anything yet. We need to go below. We're going to pause, and I'm going to take a few things off. All right. After removing the two top screws, I came down here and prepped this. I've already showed you how to remove the wooden rack, the rails, and the rail support. I also took out the one screw closest over here so I can pull this out. Now, to finish taking the divider out, Once again, I have a screw up in the ceiling of the divider. It goes into the divider, one here and one here. Pull forward slightly. There's a keyhole right about here and here. Pull forward, and once you pull out a little bit, stop, and you will find there is a wiring connection. At that point, come down here and go ahead and lift up slightly, just like you did on the upper fan shroud, and pull this down until you can gain access to this wiring harness. Once you've gained access to that harness, you can now unplug it. And once it's unplugged, this will slide out all the way. So once you get this out, you can see this is your divider, drain, flip it over, your light and your thermistor. And those are the two wires for your light and the two wires for your thermistor. So we'll set, and this also has that sweeper blade that actually contacts the glass to do the separation of the compartments. And it will fall out, so be careful. So let's set this out of our way. From here, we've already disconnected two. Disconnect your third one. And once again, now this time, you can actually see where the defrost thermistor is mounted on the pipe. So grab it and kind of pop it off. And now you can remove this piece, which has your defrost thermistor and your fan motor. The last piece is again held by two screws, 1, 2. And don't do that. Now, on this back panel, you're going to pull out slightly, and then you're going to lift. And now we have the back panel. All right. Because of my failure to maintain control of that screw, when it fell, it dropped here, and gentlemen, right here is the drain going down into the mechanical room. So I'd have to go retrieve that screw. All right, and so now we've exposed our second evaporator. Again, no heater. We're above freezing temperature. During defrost, the fans would come on. The defrost sensor would eventually be able to detect, okay, we got a clean coil, and then go back into operation. So that is the complete disassembly of the inside of the wine cooler. Now, if this were a SKS WC24, the only difference would be there would be an additional divider and an additional evaporator, fan motor, and defrost control, and sensor. So instead of 2, we would have 3, and it'd be a little wider. Otherwise, they're the same. Also, on the control, where you only saw a picture of 2 temperatures, there would be a third. It would be top, middle, bottom, or upper, middle, lower. I forget how they worded it. All right. Now, I told you I'd show you. Down here at the bottom, see these little hooks? And there's one on each side, and you'll see the slots in the back. That's why I told you, when you took the screws out, you had to lean forward and lift up. And he can show you the 2 slots there on the bottom. So when you go to reassemble, first thing is come in at an angle, catch these hooks and that slot, and then lift forward. You'll know you got it in when you can grab the bottom and pull out and it's firmly attached. Took me a time or two to get it in. Put the 2 screws back at the top. And yes, I retrieved my other screw. This is coming in. Make sure you've got your 3 wiring harnesses kind of lifted up so you don't have to search for them. And my suggestion would be place this. You've got foam on the left and right. Place it where it'll hold for just a moment and take and secure your defrost thermostat right there on that line. And actually it's on the line the cap tube comes in, not the suction as I previously stated. Then plug in your wiring harnesses. You're going to have to lift it up a little now. Again, be careful with the sides of the unit. Now, from here, I want to push this in, but I don't want to go much further because I have to put the divider in, and the divider, remember, has a wiring harness on it. So I'm going to have to leave enough room to get in there and plug this in. Now, I didn't point it out a second ago, but that hole up there in the back of the wall is for your defrost drain. So if you had a customer complaining they had water dripping from here, once you remove the center divider, you're going to check this area to make sure that it's not clogged, and then that would be, you need to check it to see if it's clogged with any debris. Okay. Now, what I found is if you'll start this sliding in place, stop it with a couple inches in the back, you can now reach in. Now, what I find easier is to remove the defrost plug first. Got unfettered access. That one goes in. That one goes in. Now carefully slide this all the way to the rear. Come up. Make sure it's pushed in. You should see your 2 screw holes line up. Come down here. Slowly lift this into place. Now the first time or two I did this, I actually used an inspection mirror to make sure my holes were lined up. Since you're going into plastics, don't just nilly-willy put it up there and start plowing away with your drill. Now replace these 2 screws. From here, we've got to place we would start replacing all our shelves. Now, I'm not going to bore you with putting shelves back in. I'm going to show you how it goes in, and that's all. The rail itself has a slot on it, so you would come in carefully, not to scratch the customer's interior, and put these over the 2 slots. Then go ahead and tighten the screw. Now, so out here in the open where you can see, this little catch is going into that notch. So you're going to apply it in, and then you're going to come down, just like we do on the rail, on the drawer of a French door. That's why you just lift up and pull away. So catch that slot in the back. And then come down, catch the front. And remember, these are the little white-headed screws. And we all thought, why did they use white-head screws? well, they're covered when the wooden bin goes back in. Please do not leave these screws out. If that rail is not secure, the customer can actually lift up and drop 4 or 5 bottles of wine. And I have been told that wine can get very expensive. All right, so now we've got all this up here done. We're going to put the upper part back together. Now again, we have the little catches down here at the bottom. Like I said earlier, I had you take the screws out the top and pivot it outward and then up. So again, we have the little catches and we have the little slots left and right here at the bottom. So I'm going to come in carefully, bring it over, push this inward, and you want to lift up a little until you can feel going in the slots, push down and back. And if you don't catch at the bottom, repeat until you get it. Now I can pull, and I'm caught on both sides. So I put my 2 screws in here. Now I'm going to pull this back out for a second. Now guys, you can see this is the tube that my defrost sensor goes on. I can actually, with this installed, put my fingers there and snap it back into position. So whatever, to me, it's easier to go ahead and put this in, leave the top 2 screws out for a second, and or put it on. It's just whatever you find easier. But you can do it with this in place. So if you were to accidentally pull that sensor off while you were taking the fan off, don't panic. You don't have to take everything apart to get this out. It will go back in. Just make sure that's there. Okay, now, I left this loose a little, but I've got my finger on that pipe right now, so it's no big deal. So I'm going to take this. Remember, these screw up into the ceiling. So what I'm going to do, again, make sure my wiring harnesses are forward. I'm going to place this in and allow the foams to kind of hold it in place for me. I'm going to drop it down just enough that I can take this piece. I know it's going to fit just like that. I'm going to come over the top, find that piece of tubing, and just snap all my snaps into place. Then I'm going to, at this point, I would think your best bet would be to drop this down just low enough to go ahead and put your other screw in, because you don't want to get that fan on and leave a screw out. Now, go ahead and plug these in. You're going to have to raise it up. Make sure you're caught before you release it. Now rotate this up, and just like before, it kind of hangs on the edge, and rotate it upward. And it's caught right here. You can pull on the bottom and it doesn't move. And now, once again, because it's way back in the back there, once again, I'm just going to take and push this back. Make sure my screw hole is visible. And it is when I put a slight pressure on the rear. There's one. And two. I'm going to show you what you're dealing with up top. This will go in. This over here is the back of the unit. This goes in. These are the holes that come up where the screws are. This is your front, your display. Now, you'll notice right here these plastic or nylon washers. There's one here and here. Okay, these slots are catching there. That's why I said once you take the two screws out, just slide this forward a little, because what's going to happen when we install this in the top, we can catch it on the top. We put this in place and then this slides backwards and the screws actually go through the front. So if you're ever just wanting to take the console out, take the two screws out, you can pull this and drop it. Problem is there's nothing holding this anymore and it may just fall and could damage something, so always take it out. It's only one connection. But guys, that's why I was able to slide this forward, take this out and leave this hanging, because it was on those nylon washers. So when we come back in, again, we can take, found it easier, just go ahead and plug in my two plugs here. Catch this lightly, come up and just, it's caught, and now pull it forward a little bit, make sure it's holding. Now I can take this piece, I'm going to want to plug it in, pick this up all the way to the rear, lift this up into place. This is where you have to move this again. One other thing, see the point here in the middle? There is a hole in the roof of the refrigerator, or the wine cooler. So this has to go in, kind of angle it to the back. You'll see those catches back there, and then kind of, it'll hold, but guys, it's not going to hold tight forever. So with this in place, I can now slide this back. And now everything, now this is actually holding the front. And I can put the two screws that have the little buttons on the front. And then take your little button carefully, place it over the hole and snap it in place. Then do the other one, and that's the reassembly. All right, to access the machine compartment of this unit, on the SKS products that have this type setup and hinge, there's always going to be two screws angled in this way and one screw angled in this way. So wherever the hinge is, you're only going to find one screw. You'll find two on the opposite. And that's the rule of thumb I found thus far. Now, those screws are at a pretty tight angle, so it is suggested to have a stubby with you. And I'm doing this like I was working off the floor, not this elevated platform. You would need to use a stubby to get to it. Now on the upper one, just be careful you don't damage these grills. So if you like using a cordless, just remember that the holder could wind up scratching these vents. And when a customer is paying this much for a refrigerator, they're not going to be appreciative of that. So guys, you may want to use a straight screwdriver here. Okay, since I do have the room to get on it, trying to figure out what the heck happened here. I had this, I shouldn't be just rambling. Okay. So remove those two, and you would have one over here. Ours came in without one, so I'm going to show you where the screw would be. If you see, in fact, here's 1, 2, and 1. So if you can see right here on the bottom of the grate, you'd see where that hole is right there. there would have been a screw there. So there's your 3 screws, and if the hinge were reversed, it'd be 2 in 1. Now, this is your front. Since the doors are reversible on many of the products, you'll have to refer to your particular unit to find out if yours is 1. This is made to where you can flip which is which for if we were to change the hinge. But these are adjustable in the field also. So let's lay it over there. Now, next you remove these 2 screws. This is like a little kick plate. And if you have a Wi-Fi issue, this is also where the Wi-Fi PCB is located. Right here. Now, a word of warning to you. If this part were bad, do not attempt to pull this connector off. 1, they put the lock on the back side. 2, it was designed to take off right here. Then you pull the 1 screw and you got the Wi-Fi module. When we first started doing this, we didn't know that. So when we attempted, we put a flat blade behind it to hit the lock. We didn't realize they glued it all together and we ruined the Wi-Fi board. So no one else has to make this mistake. Always just follow the harness back and disconnect it, usually right here. And that gets your kick plate and your Wi-Fi board just comes off. What I'm going to try to do is work my way backward. So while we're still here, let's look at this. This is your knock-on sensor. So if you were to knock on the glass, this is where the sensor is located. Now, to get to the sensor, we've got to remove a couple of screws here, a screw here. There is an articulating arm, I'm holding my finger on it, that as you open and close the door, the wiring harness actually comes down. There's 2 screws over here, and then this runs all the way up to this plug. So if we had a problem with our knock-on sensor, to service it, once you unplugged it, you would take and remove the following screws. Hopefully I'm not in your way. Now this piece comes off. There's your knock-on sensor. This is your articulating arm. And for me to finish dropping it, all we'd have to do is take these 2 screws off right here. Can they see them? Okay, if you'll get a shot of those 2. Yeah. These 2 screws right here. And that would have the whole piece in my hand. Okay? So let's go ahead and put this back. When you put it back, just make sure you've got your wires go back into here so you're not pinching them. Put this up, and this will go, it snaps right into place just like you heard. Now, you do notice that where this is positioned to service the knock-on sensor, we would have had to remove the door panel. And the installation and adjustment of door panels will be done in a different video. Then once everything is put back together, always take and open the door a couple of times to make sure the articulating arm is right, that you've got your wiring harness to where nothing's going to be pinched or damaged, and then run it back over and plug it in up here to the top. Okay, so now to get the PCB out of here, the PCB is located right here. You need to disconnect all the harnesses from the top. Now, we already know this one, so I'm going to move it out of our way, and it's that first plug. But now, and on this unit, we actually had a couple of plugs not plugged in. I don't know if you're going to find that in the field, or that was only on our prototype. But at this point, go through and begin removing all your different connectors. Now the nice part is we found out that they're kind of idiot proof. The right one only plugs into the right spot. There are several that the connectors are on the back side. What I found was there are 5 screws that have to be unscrewed to slide this base forward. If you slide this base forward about 1/2 inch, you can actually get to those. And again, if you don't have a small enough driver, like I don't, use your stubby Phillips. Three, 4, and 5. Okay, now, if we slide this forward just a little bit, we can now get our fingers in there and hit the release for the wiring harness. I got my finger on it. And there it went. Now, since I'm getting back further into an area where a cut hazard exists, I'm going to put my gloves on. To remove this yellow connector, what I've had to do, due to the size of my fingers, they've got 2 connectors side by side. My finger's big enough I can't get it between the 2, so I took a piece of solder and just put a little bend in it and found that I can stick it in the back side, feel around for the hole, push, and release the tab. What you're trying to do to get in there, you can use a piece of solder to push that in and pull down simultaneously. Reached in, I've taken all my other connectors off, so basically you want all your Molex connectors disconnected. Then you've got 2 screws over here on this side, 1, 2, holding the board in. Again, this is where having a stubby comes in handy. Fairly long screws. There's 1. Now, you also have a ground wire and screw right here that has to be removed. To remove the board, once all that's out, pull the board away from the sidewall and then slide forward. I left 1 connector still connected. I'd ensure that you've got all your connectors. I actually had left 1 back here in the back. And now that we have them all, once again, bring it out from the sidewall and pull forward. From here, to gain access to the board, you have a cover which is going to snap off. And you have to kind of loosen the wiring harnesses and push them through. And here's your main board. there's not a way to leave this plugged in to do voltage checks. We're checking with the factory right now to find out how we're supposed to do voltage checks, because we'd have to get the board out here, take the cover off, and then we would have to replug everything back in. Now, one other thing I want to show you while we're here is there is a screw in here that allows you to tighten or loosen the hinge in the upper and lower hinge assembly. So it lets you know to increase or to decrease the pressure on the spring. Now, to pull the seal system out for servicing, if the door hinge is on the right hand side of the unit, the door and hinge have to come off. Now, if you look in our service manual, the service manual says to take and unbolt these two and the same two at the top to remove the door. Then you would come in and loosen these two bolts in their keyhole so you could slide this over and take it off. What we have found out, it's just about as easy to take these two, loosen them, loosen the two at the top, and depending on your strength, it can take 2 men to take the door off. It definitely takes 2 to put it back on and get these aligned. Now once they're in place, there's a little alignment pin that's going to help you out, and then all you do is tighten these back down. What we don't know, because we haven't received our door panels yet, is if there's any danger, because the door panel is going to come down further to hide some stuff here. We don't know if taking the door off, if we were to take it off the way the manual shows, you'd have to remove the door skin first, then take the door. What we're unsure of is if we take it off here, if there's any chance we could damage a door. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to take and loosen these 2 screws, the 2 at the top, and we're going to remove the door in that way. Okay, what I've got here is a T30 bit, and I'm going to be done before the door comes off. Remove the 4 screws that we talked about earlier to drop the knock-on door attachment down. Now, we're still not done. We have to remove these screws to get this whole hinge bar out. This plastic shroud around the condenser has to come out to allow this whole tray to slide forward. So, okay. So there are 3 bolts. All these are T30s. So now we've got a clean area to work. Now, I want to point out a couple of things to you before we begin. Your condenser is aluminum. It's only held into this plastic housing by clips down here at the bottom. There's 1 and 2. To get this out, the first thing you need to do is unsnap the condenser from the fan shroud cover. We found just by using a little putty knife and placing it here, and once you raise it up a little, you can pull the condenser out slightly, push the other one down a little, and don't be that violent. Once you pull this condenser out, you're going to very carefully pull it out and swing it 90 degrees. You have enough tubing, just be careful, don't kink anything, and bend this out of your way. You're going to need it about a full 90-degree bend. Now, at this point, we can actually begin pulling the tray forward a little bit. Now, I need to pull this fan assembly out. You're going to take and pull the fan and again go underneath and kind of lift and pull. And this fan shroud will come out. Now, one of the connectors that I disconnected when taking all the connections off for the PCB happened to be the fan. Now the fan, this is a shroud. There's the fan motor. You can actually reach in, pull the blade. There's your blade. And then come back here, 4 screws to remove what they're calling a DC motor. So that's your condenser fan motor and shroud assembly. You'll notice on the bottom it has, let me get the putty knife to show you, these little flanges, and they actually go into these little cutouts right here. So that's why if you kind of pry a little bit to get it started, because when it goes in at an angle and kind of thunk, so it doesn't go, so you got to kind of pry the front up and they'll slide right out for you. So now at this point, my condenser tray for servicing is good, and I can now take and very gently begin sliding my condenser tray forward, and you can keep pulling forward. You may have to put your hand back here, move a wiring harness left or right that's left here until you can pull this out for service. Now, I'm going to lay down in the way for a moment to make sure. Okay, I need to disconnect the harness going to the compressor because that's what I'm being fought with. Now we can pull this forward as much as we have to have. Now, if you'll notice, this is your high side loop coming out, and then right about where my finger is, it turns to a very heavy like heat shrink or plastic dip. It drops into the defrost drain pan and makes 2 or 3 loops before it heads out the back. And it comes up out of here, goes into my condenser, comes out, goes to the dryer, goes to the 3-way valve, Yoder loops, etc. Now, so that's your high side. This, back here on this far side of the compressor, this is your suction line. And it, behind the unit, has a curl to allow you to slide this tray forward. They do warn you, especially when you go to put this back in, make sure you're being careful not to kink the line going back in. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but I'm going to put my finger on it. Right here where my hand is your process tube for charging the compressor. Now, even though the factory, when they charge this unit, everything's together, so they run this process tube all the way to the back, and the dryer's process tube also goes all the way to the back of the unit. They pull a vacuum and charge it from the rear. We're doing front serviceability, so if you were to replace this compressor, you would actually take and have your process tube come forward, because hopefully we don't have to pull this thing out if we ever did have to do a compressor job on it. Process tube, okay. Now, from this position, you could now take and remove the compressor. With the compressor removed, you could get to your dryer. And I'm doing this, I can't see where I'm putting my hand, but right here's the dryer. With the compressor removed, you could cut the dryer out. You could then put your dryer back in with lock ring, then put the compressor in. Challenge that I am seeing on the compressor: if you cannot cut the line of the compressor, in other words, clean this up and cut that stub to come back with a lock ring, you're probably going to have to rebend your copper, both here and the suction line in the back. Your condenser, if it ever had to be replaced, is right here. You can make your cuts to change it. Now, the big thing when you go to reassemble this and you put it all back is while you're pushing the tray backward, you have to put your hand behind there and feel that suction line and make certain that it's coiling back and it's not kinking in two, because right now we've taken that coil and we've pretty much stretched it out to get this work. Then to put it back, as you push back, my suggestion, what I've done on the one I did, was I put my arm in there and I just felt, and as I pushed back, I was helping get that curvature of the suction line back into place. Now, the last thing, if you'll notice in the far back of the unit, there is a drain tube. That drain tube, you have to make certain that you reinsert it into this plastic drain pan. If you don't make certain that you've got that drain tube back in the plastic pan, you can actually shove all this back, because there's a little, the bottom of the process tube, you could actually shove all this back and crush it and it be outside the drain pan. Then what would happen is every time the unit defrosted, water would run on the floor and cause damage to the home. So please ensure at the end of the job that you've reached in and made sure that the drain line has gotten back into the pan. You'll notice they put styrofoam spacers. These are to make sure this doesn't go all the way to the bottom and rattle. It keeps it off, but it's about that deep or about that far from the bottom if you've done it right. That way, if water builds up in there, the heat from the condenser gets rid of the water. What I've done is I've pulled the unit and flipped it around for you. In the field, we're not normally going to have access to this side of the unit, but this bracket is held on by 2 screws, and you'll notice this little U shape. That's to hold our defrost drain, which comes down, snaps into this, and this is supposed to be made sure that it goes back in the defrost drain pan. If not, you could push it back and this would start leaking water all over the floor. Now, also, excuse me, also to show you, here's that loop I was telling you about with your suction line that allowed us to bring out that whole condensing tray. But as you see, we are fixed on about how far we can go back. Now, when you start pushing it back, you want to reach in and make sure that this is kind of coming back without kinking. One of the units I was working on, I did get a kink just starting, so I had to hold my hand there so the bend would happen in another part of the tubing. Now, here, like I said, the only thing back here would be the power cord. You'd have to come in. There's a clip and a ground screw, 2 screws, replace the cord. The rest of the unit is front serviceable. Now, I'm going to just kind of lay this out of the way, because what I want to do from back here is I'm going to pull the tray back to give you an idea of what's happening behind it. As the tray starts coming back, you have to be careful. Watching your line. And remember, there's going to be a wall here, so it's not like you can push it back. That's why they've got all this thing foamed up. So as you push back, you have enough room on the 18. If you've big arms like I do, it's tight. but you can actually get your arm in and just feel to make sure that you're not kinking anything. And you also notice right here where the line comes out of the cabinet. That's why you can't pull it too far forward, because you could actually reach up and kink here. So as you're pushing it back, you see how this loop that we had stretched out is now coming back together. And we'll go ahead and finish assembling it. But remember this, there's a hole right here where the drain came out. In fact, that's where I fished my screw out from that I dropped. But this has to mount up in there, and when you're done at the end, you need to ensure, so we don't get rattling, you're pushing it back into that little holder. And this will be connected to the top, and that's what holds your drain tube assembly in place. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this back together in the back. We'll flip it back around and show you how to put the condensing tray back in, the condenser fan back in, and go from there. Oh, make sure I go ahead and place this up here. And you see it's loose enough, you can get it up there. There is a tab where a screw looks like it could have gone. Mine did not have a screw in it from the factory, so I'm going to assume that they changed their mind about putting a screw somewhere that we couldn't possibly reach. So just in case, if you take it apart, don't go, oh my gosh, where did that screw go? Because I didn't have one. So you have two screws here. And then we had four holding this top piece on. So that's the back of our unit. Flip the unit back around. Like I said, as you push this back, just reach back occasionally. All right, before you go back too far, these two holes that the bottom of the condenser fan hook into, you want to make sure this is back at least this far before you clip these in, or these will actually catch the bottom and it'll lock you and you won't be able to push it all back in place. So before you push those in, just make sure it's back at least this far so these tabs can go between this bottom pan and this upper pan in between. Okay? The other thing you might find easier at this point is to loosely just lay this here, reach in and plug this in. And if you look in the top back here where all these terminal connections, it goes in the only blue connector. You may want to connect this prior to getting too much further. If not, at a minimum, please make sure you put this, because remember, we still have to plug our compressor back in. In fact, I'm going to push this in just enough. I've got my compressor plugged in now. I'm actually going to take this and plug it in here. Again, just move your condenser a little bit over. And no, I don't have my fan on right now because it's easier for me to maneuver this into position. And you'll kind of feel when those clips go in and they catch. When you can't, you hold the tray, and when you can't push this back any further, and you'll see the two holes line up right here and here, because remember we had screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, holding the tray down. So now I've got this in place. Now I can put my fan blade on, push it on until it stops, and then I'm going to finish my pushback to get this all the way back. Now, my condenser, I'm going to lift up and I'm carefully going to swing it around, to go back into this position. Guys, one of the kind of tight points is if you'll, right here, I'm going to pull the condenser back, but if you see that L up there, you have to tilt the condenser down enough. It's got to go under that L. There's also one on the other side. And then you push in till it clips there and clips there. Remember, that's all that holds this condenser in are those snaps. There. Now we're staying in where we're supposed to. Then look at your lines to make sure you haven't kinked anything. Being careful the whole time. All right. All the way to the rear. You'll see what I was trying to warn you about earlier. I've got the pan pushed just about all the way in. My screw holes are lining up, but I missed my drain. So you've got to reach back very carefully until you get your defrost drain. Pull it over into the pan. I'm feeling with my fingers. I can feel that I'm in the pan. I can also feel I just took that off. It is possible to pull this all the way back out the front. Put your little duck bill back on it. Now, without knocking the duck bill off, I need to get this back into position. Okay, the duck bill is in the drain. I've got the lower part of the drain in the little Y, the foamed Y in the back, and I've got the drain reattached to the refrigerator. At this point, you can go ahead and start lining things up, pushing them back, making sure everything's locked into place again. Remember, you've got holes here that have to get lined up. You've got holes here and here. So what I'm going to do is put my 5 screws back here in the base before I go to put my PCB board back in. Okay, to replace the PCB, first off I want to show you these 2 tabs that stick out right here. If you look back here, you'll see 2 holes back here in the back. 1, 2. Now, before you attempt this, make sure any tubing that needs to be repositioned, you should be strumming your tubing to make sure nothing's rattling. But you're going to place this board back until these 2 tabs fit in those 2 slots, and then come forward, and these 2 holes will now line up with the 2 screw holes here and here. Then plug all the wires back in. Having these at an angle, make sure all your wires are down. Slide this in. Until it fits in that hole. And just like that, it falls back into position. Replace the 2 screws, plug all the wires in. As I said, mine is a prototype and has some harnesses that are not hooked up and used. So I will just tell you in the field, re-plug in all the harnesses you disconnected. Now that I've got all my wires connected, I've still got a spot here that my door knock circuit will plug into, and I have a spot here that my Wi-Fi board will plug into. So everything's back. I've double checked that none of my stuff is rattling. So here we need to put the hinge back on. What I did do to make this a little easier, I removed the final 2 screws which were holding the hinge on to this articulating assembly for the door knock. That's the way it'd be serviced anyway. So what I want to do is put the 3 bolts back in that hold my hinge on, and so we can get this door on. So you have 3 flathead T30 bolts. two countersunk bolts we need to start lightly, because remember we have the hourglass or a little offset on the hinge that's going to go in and catch here. All right. Now, these 2 points right here, and this, these 2 points actually go into 2 spots on the hinge bracket, here and here. So they'll fit in there, and those 2 dots that stick out will fit in here and here. So once you get this in position and these hit here, and these 2 screws go in that slot, that holds everything so you know it's aligned. Then you just tighten these down, and you do that on both top and bottom. And again, this requires a second man to get this in position. Now once you get the door back on, guys, my suggestion is, due to the weight, follow up with your ratchet to ensure those T30s are good and tight. And a visual inspection, make sure those prongs went into the slots. Everything looks good there. And drop down and do the same to the bottom. All right, so now finish our assembly. We've just got a couple more things to do. So remember, this is our articulating arm and everything for our door, knock-on door PCB. So what we want to do is make sure we put this all back together. Now, this actually has 2 screws which hold it over here. So you're going to come in, and I believe all these screws, no, 2 were silver. Here, everything else is white. This one comes in here. And then this one. And again, watch your wiring harness. There's a little cutout for it to come over on both sides. That goes under that little rubber. Wires are all covered. Now, what you want to do is slowly open the door. Make sure your articulating arm is going to work correctly. It does. Bring it back, and we're good. This wiring harness, we're going to go ahead and open the door now. This wiring harness you're going to bring over and run it around, and it plugs in right up here at the top. It's the only open large connector. Right there. And then take that and just move it out of the way. Now we're going to pull out our kick plate with our Wi-Fi. Remember, this is the one you don't want to try to unplug from the board. It plugs in right here. They give you plenty of wire. Now on our unit, we actually found this harness. They had kind of pushed it right here, right around this area. So I'm going to try to put it back there. On a wine cooler, knowing if it ever had to be serviced. So run this, just push this down, get your wires out of the way. One final look. Now we're going to take our grill, and remember, you have 1, 2, 3. Ours was missing one, and I haven't got a screw to replace it yet, so I'm just going to put it back with what I had. Like I said earlier, guys, be careful going in here, especially with a screwdriver. You don't want to scratch up these louvers. I'd hate for you to have to order one because you scratched it up and the customer doesn't want to see the scratches. And then my final screw would go in right there, and that would hold this up. So one last time while everything's here, shut the door, make sure everything closes well. And I've got a little bit of a catch right here. Got a little plastic catch here. It should be holding tighter in. So maybe I did not. Okay, push that in tighter. Bingo. Okay, I just didn't. You got to push in as you tighten this to get this arm to go and push this up so the articulating arm doesn't drag. All right. The last thing I want to do does come back on. Now, the board, like I said, does have a power button where if the customer presses and holds for 3 seconds, they turn the unit off. The power button will stay lit, and that's just to let them know where to push to turn the unit back on. Push. And the unit comes on. Then adjustments can be made in 45. If I were setting up my Wi-Fi, I would press and hold until the Wi-Fi icon began blinking. I can now set up my app. We're experiencing thunderstorms in the area. It's very humid in our room today, so I would leave the humidity button going. I've got all my drawers back in, or my racks, and the unit's all reassembled. Like I said later in the videos, we will show you the proper way to put on the doors and to adjust them. With the wine cooler, putting on the door, getting it straight, but if it's been installed into a wood cabinet, there may have to be some adjustment. But when you see the refrigerator and freezer, when they're put together as an installation kit, each door may have to go up, down, left, right to get them perfect. And once we get those panels in, that'll be a standalone video, because it doesn't matter if it's a refrigerator, a freezer, a wine cooler. Putting the door panel on is putting the door panel on. So on behalf of the training department, I appreciate you joining us today to learn about the SKS WC18, the 18 wine cooler. We will be doing continuing videos on the column refrigerators. Please join us. Be safe out there.